Even a small, a school district or an office, they're constantly saying, well, let's renovate and make this room one big room. As soon as you document everything about all your portfolio, if something changes, how can you rely on is anything accurate? So we're trying to get as close to possible to having accurate real-time floor plans connected to real-time buildings. On the right side there, you're seeing the Google Earth view, and the light bulbs, as you click on things, it's actually showing the light bulbs turning red means something is going on there. Let's take a look inside the building. And in Google Earth, there's great tools, like some of the buildings already have the outer skin of what it looks like. And when we open up inside it, this is coming from our server now. So the outside skin was coming from Google Earth. This is from our server. And that particular room is red. Something's going on inside that room. The building was red. The room is red. What inside the room is red. And our handler is red. You're able to just zoom right into it and keeping the data light. There's no reason to have a very heavy model. You're not really engineering the building. You're looking to see what issues there are with the design or with the operations. Back to the Onuma system here. So once you click on there, you can zoom back and say, well, let's drill down and see what that room is about. And we can spot that air handling unit and look at it in 3D as well here. And over there on the Google Earth side, you're just viewing data, but here the user can actually start interacting. I can start moving things. If I have the right access level, again, it's obviously about the discussions about security and access. If you have the right access level, then you can get to that piece of equipment and do something with it, whether you say, okay, we need to renovate it or move it, or eventually say, we'll turn that piece of equipment off. By knowing where it is in relation to the whole scenario, then you're able to drill down into it. So just backing up again too, in the overall view of things, as you're doing the early planning for this, if we think of this as completed buildings, but imagine in the early planning stages, in the design and construction and engineering phase in the building industry, it's extremely inefficient right now. There's so much waste in that process because things are not kept documented well. Data is thrown away once the building is complete. Nobody's really communicating with each other because it's not real time. You print out a set of documents, you send it from the architect to the engineer. 2 weeks later, they highlight something and say, here's an issue, and send it back. Imagine if in the airline industry we're doing reservations for Delta Airlines, and you had to wait for 2 weeks to get a bid on a flight schedule. That's essentially what's happening in the building industry, which means there's a lot of opportunity out there to connect the dots in design, to connect the dots with energy. So what we do with the Homeland Security headquarters with DHS, we essentially set up the requirements to say the owner wants to design a building like this, here's all the equipment that's needed in it, here's the functionality of the spaces. Instead of handing the architect 1,000 pages of documents and say, go design with this, you hand them a model. Here's the model, building information model in open standard format. They can pull it into their application. So this is completely coming from what started in Excel, all the spaces, all the equipment. Now they know what to design with. They don't have to spend weeks analyzing a PDF document and then creating a CAD file or creating a BIM file. It's automatically in there, which means as they're designing, we can check the delta and see how close they were to that original design. So again, that's back in the early phase of design, but the same thing happens once the building is complete. If you have that data there, then you can start working with that to manage the facility. Some more views of the Onuma system interface. The floor plan, color coding with different data coming in, the live sensor data coming in from the VROC server. And I think there's going to be a lot more examples like this, especially at a show like this. We're looking for ways to connect to other systems. There's a lot of hardware and software and other systems out there. No system is going to be able to do this by itself. It's all about creating the connections with others. So here's a webcam, here's a location of the webcam, here's a sensor for a piece of equipment. The equipment is right there. Importing and exporting to other formats. So we've been very focused over the last 10 years of how do we share data with other systems. We don't want to trap it only in ours, so we're working with a format called COBE, which is a NASA and the Corps of Engineers standard for sharing facility data for equipment, life cycle data, COBIE, construction operation, building information exchange, connecting buildings to data. Okay, so let's, I'll go into, this is another example from Mike Lavelle of a building in Mason City. Mason City? Mike, if you want to say anything, you're welcome to come up here, but...
Go right ahead.
Okay. All right, so I'll open some live files here next. I can take any questions if there are any questions. I'm going too fast here? Okay. All right, so here is the system itself. So we're live on the internet now. Let's go back to the starting point here. And I'll show a little bit of Google Earth before I go into this. So in Google Earth, if there's some really interesting tools just built right into Google Earth, and we layer our data directly on top of that. The color coding and the buildings are coming from our files. There's a timeline aspect to it, which seems to be trying to load right now. Let's see what's going on. Let's go back to this. And you can export it directly from our system. So this is a list of what we call studios. A studio could be a university client or an owner like GSA. Here's a sample GSA, what we call a studio. If you go to map view, the map is actually Google Map in the background. Each red dot is a project. If I click on a dot, I can start drilling into that project. It could also change the color code of the dot if something's happening there, for example. It's also possible. But imagine this as a portfolio view of existing buildings for GSA, and GSA has multiple regions. So if you go in the National Capital Region and click on L'Enfant Plaza, there's the location in Washington, D.C. for a study that's happening. This is all sample data, it's not the real project data. So if I open that up next, it's going to start drilling into that site. So now we're loading, this is from a server in Nevada, pulling the data in real time and showing me the site plan of the building. And imagine that, and this is all live data, so I can actually zoom in and zoom out, interact with that. So if I click on a building, it brings up information about that particular building. I can go into edit mode. I'm all in view mode right now, so different users have different levels of access. Just like you can't go on Expedia and say, I'm going to change the fuel level on a plane. It says, what seat would you like to buy? That's all you can do. You can't reserve the pilot seat. Here I can say, okay, I want to edit this because I've logged in with my name. Certain users can do things to the plan. Like only certain users can move a building, and I have that level of access, so I can grab a building and move it or even delete it if I don't want it there anymore. Or I can say, well, I want to find out information about this particular building here. And I pull up the attributes, and it shows me this is a new construction, phase 2 construction starting in 2012, and the primary tenant is GSA. Okay, let's go look inside that building. Drilling into that building, it pulls up more information. So I see a floor plan, and I have it set on temperature and efficiency. So this color coding that's changing here, it's actually the current temperature coming from sensors. And these pie charts here are showing me which rooms have inefficient reheating. So based on engineering rules that Lavelle Energy set, here is something that's coming out of range. And that can be dialed up or down, obviously, by the building owner. You start setting these different rules, and you see these floor plans in the background. And because I have the right to edit, I can actually say, well, I'm thinking of doing a renovation here. This graphic is updated, which means that as I'm editing this, anybody in the world that has access to this plan, including the owner, if I want to give them access to it, they can see what's going on. They can see what I'm thinking of doing, and I can share that view with them. So I can say, okay, let's look at sending this link to the owner, and this is a completely different interface now that the owner is actually pulling up that floor plan, say the first floor plan with hours of operation. They can't edit any of this, but this is streaming in as I'm making those changes. So if I have this over here and I made this change here and I save it, this is me in Pasadena, and maybe the owner is in Washington, D.C., and I'm giving them access to view this. As they update this, as I update these, you see the edit that's happened. They're actually seeing the edits that are happening across the world, which makes it very easy to collaborate, because I can say I'm thinking of doing this. Sometimes it could take 2 weeks to send a request like this, attach an email, what version are we looking at? Here we can go directly to it and start seeing what's going on. And they can navigate through other parts of the building and say, well, I want to see the furniture plan of this office. I'm giving them access to certain views in the building, not to the whole building. I'm giving them access to this room and this particular list of equipment here. They can click on the air handling unit if I want to give them that level of access, and actually I haven't. I've locked that part so they can't see that. But if I go back to my interface and say, well, I want to go into that space, now I keep drilling into the space, one floor of the building, one room, going specifically to a piece of equipment and saying, what's going on with that air handling unit? It's red. It's red because the sensor has gone out of range. So here's a sensor